Nuclear War Survival Skills, Chapter 6 continued, page 65. Directional fanning to ventilate shelters. Directional fanning is the simplest way to force enough outdoor air through typical basement, trench, and other expedient shelters to maintain endurable conditions, even in extremely hot, humid weather. During a worsening nuclear crisis, most unprepared citizens probably will not have the time and/or materials needed to make a cap or other efficient shelter ventilating pump, even if they have the instructions. In contrast, tests with average citizens have indicated that if they have instructions for making and using directional fans, and if there are a few hours of warning time before the attack, then the majority will be able to ventilate all of their expedient shelters, except some of the largest. The principal disadvantage of directional fans is that they are more laborious to operate than are caps that are manually powered, pendulum-like air pumps that conserve energy. A. Directional fanning to ventilate and cool smaller shelters. A two-handed directional fan of the size illustrated is less tiring to use and requires less manual dexterity than does a one-handled fan with the same size blade. With this small two-handled fan, you quite easily can force about 300 cubic feet per minute, 300 CFM, of outdoor air through a crowded trench or basement shelter. This is enough air for up to 9 adults crowded into a small shelter in extremely hot, humid weather, and enough for about 100 people in cold weather. By fanning vigorously, 500 to 600 cubic feet per minute have been forced through a small covered trench shelter. Here is the diagram of the blade. It shows the blade is 14 inches wide, and from the handle to the top of the blade, it's 22 inches long. The blade in length is 16 inches long, and the handle is 6 inches. To make a durable two-handled fan, first make its frame out of 2 sticks each, 14 inches long, and 2 sticks each 22 inches long. See the sketch we just went over. To strengthen the corners, overlap the sticks about 1/2 inch as shown. When using sticks cut from a tree, select ones with diameters of about 3/4 inch and make shallow notches in all 4 sticks before tying together the 4 corners of the blade. If you do not have strong string, use it's kind of hard to read. Something, it's like probably I can't honestly read that. It's like a 1/4 inch wide, maybe less. It almost looks like a 0.4 inch wide strips of bed sheet cloth or other strong cloth, slightly twisted. If using sawed sticks, be sure to use none smaller than 3/8 by 3/4 inch in cross section. If you have very small nails or brads, use only one to connect each corner. Then tie each corner securely. To prevent possible blistering of hands, wrap cloth around the fan handles or wear gloves. To cover the fan's blade, any strong, light fabric, such as bed sheet cloth, serves well. If you are going to sew on the cloth, first cut a 26 inch by 30 inch piece. Wrap the 30-inch width smoothly crosswise around the frame. After cutting 4 notches in the cloth's corners so that the tied together parts of the sticks will not be covered, pin or tape the cloth to make a smooth blade. Finally, sew securely. If waterproof construction adhesive is available, a smaller piece of cloth can be used and the blade can be covered in a very few minutes. If time and/or materials are very limited, make a fan with its blade merely a piece of cloth connecting two 22-inch long sticks. This very simple fan is reasonably effective, although tiring to use. Cardboard covering a blade is likely to become damp and fragile in the humid air of a crowded shelter. Very light sheet metal makes a good fan blade and requires only 2 sticks. A blade of 1/4 inch plywood is too heavy. If no sticks are available, a double thickness of heavy, stiff cardboard, 22 inches long by 14 inches wide, will pump almost as much air, if used, as a handleless fan. The pieces should be securely tied or taped together. If waterproof tape is available, cover the parts that you will grip with sweaty hands, thus preventing dampening and softening the cardboard. For maximum ventilation, the air intake opening of a shelter should be at least as large as its air exhaust opening. If the air exhaust opening of your small shelter is much larger than that shown in the sketches, block part of it off to reduce it to approximately this 24-inch high by 20-inch wide size for more effective use with this fan. The air should be fanned out of the shelter in the direction in which the air is naturally flowing. For maximum ventilation rate, fan about 40 strokes per minute. With one or more directional fans, air inside a shelter can be distributed effectively and the occupants cooled. Also, if during the time of maximum fallout dose rate, the occupants get close together in the most protective parts of the shelter, they often will get unbearably hot unless fanned. To fan air out through an air exhaust opening, sit facing the opening with your elbows about 4 inches lower than the bottom of the opening. Then count 1, 2, 3 while you, number 1, quickly raise the fan to a vertical position, close in front of your face, and immediately fan, which means push, a slug of air into the opening, ending the power stroke with your arms fully extended and with the fan almost horizontal and out of the way of air that was sucked behind the fan and is still flowing out through the opening. 2 and 3, after a slight pause, leisurely withdraw the almost horizontal fan until the bottom of its blade almost touches your stomach, preparatory to the next power stroke. To increase the flow of air through the shelter while fanning the occupants, have 2 or more occupants sitting inside the shelter, each use a fan of the size described above to fan the air so as to increase its velocity in the direction in which air already is flowing through the shelter. Such directional fanning is especially effective in increasing the airflow through small, narrow shelters. To avoid higher radiation exposures near openings, build an essentially airtight partition across the shelter room with a 24-inch by 20-inch wide hole in it through which to fan. By fanning through a 24 by 20-inch hole in a cardboard partition built across a doorway inside a U-shaped permanent trench shelter, 76 feet long, the airflow was increased by an average of 32 cubic feet per minute. Here's the diagram of the dude using the fan. It's kind of hard to read. It says something about exhaust opening a hole or regular duct 24 inches high by 20 inches wide. Forcefully fan push air into the duct. It shows the end of the power stroke until the fan is almost horizontal. And then it shows him withdraw the fan until its blade almost touches your belly. Then immediately begin the next power stroke by quickly raising the fan. B. Directional fanning to ventilate and cool larger shelters. Number 1. With a large one-man fan. To ventilate larger basements, begin big covered trenches and other large shelters lacking adequate ventilation, use one or more large one-man fans. See sketch. Note that the 20 by 30 inch fan blade is made like a two-stick kite, and that the upper end of the longer diagonal stick serves as a 10-inch handle. The model illustrated is made of two nominal 1 by 2 inch boards, one 46 inches long and the other 35 inches long. These boards are connected at a point 17.5 inches from their lower ends. First with a single clinched nail and then by being tied securely. The edges of the handle are rounded smooth. The blade frame is covered on both sides with strong bedsheet cloth. This is wrapped around and secured to the strong cords or wires tied to notches cut in the boards or sticks near the four corners of the blade. If cord or wire is not available, 4 2-inch wide strips of strong cloth, slightly twisted, serve well. Here is the diagram of the upper part of the doorway, which is blocked off. And then underneath it, it shows the fan. You can see the handle, which is 10 inches long. And the fan is 20 inches wide by 30 inches in length. You can see that that's the doorway. And something about the lower 40% maybe. The upper part of the doorway is blocked off. And he's fanning underneath the doorway, it looks like. Page 66. A durable but laboriously heavy fan can be made in a few minutes using a 20 by 30 inch piece of 1/4 inch plywood nailed to a single 46 inch long 1 by 2 inch board, or use single round stick about 1 3/4 inches in diameter, flattened on one side. A fan with its blade made of 2 sheets of very heavy cardboard tied on both sides of a 1 by 2 inch board is decidedly effective when dry. However, typical cardboard will become soft and worthless in most crowded, long-occupied, humid shelters. To fan directionally, it is best to stand just outside and to one side of a doorway, so that your body does not obstruct the airflow. Preferably stand opposite and facing the open door, which should be secured open and perpendicular to its doorway. Hold the fan like a golf club and swing it with your arms extended. Then slowly count 1, 2, while you 1. Make the power stroke with the fan blade broadside until the end of the stroke, when you quickly turn it 90 degrees. Number 2, make the pendulum like return stroke with the fan blade kept edgewise, which means feathered, to the airflow until the end, when you quickly turn it 90 degrees. Preparatory to making the next power stroke. To pump more air, block off the upper part of the doorway with cloth, cardboard, plywood, etc. to prevent air from flowing back in the wrong direction through the upper part of the doorway. See sketch on preceding page. Whenever practical, directionally fan the air in the same direction that the air is naturally flowing through the shelter. More air usually can be pumped through a shelter if the fan is used to force air out through the air exhaust opening. This reduces the air pressure inside the shelter and causes fresh outdoor air to be sucked into the shelter through the air intake doorway or through other large air intake openings. Thus, with one fan, 1,000 cubic feet per minute can be pumped through a fully occupied shelter. This is enough outdoor air, if it is properly distributed within the shelter, to maintain tolerable conditions for weeks for 25 occupants during extremely hot weather and for up to 300 occupants during cold weather. To ventilate and cool a room having only one doorway and no other opening, do not block off any part of the doorway. If air is fanned into such a room through the lower part of its completely open doorway, then air will flow back out of the room through the upper part of the doorway. However, this pumps much less air than when a separate large air exhaust opening is provided. To increase the flow of outdoor air through a tunnel shelter, several fanners equally spaced along its length should each fan in the direction of the natural airflow. This procedure was first proved practical during a 1981 ventilation test that Crescent H. Kearney participated in with Chinese civil defense officials in the port city of Dalian. In this test, 5 fanners, each with a fan of approximately the size illustrated, forced air from the outdoors through a 395-foot section between 2 opened entrances of a typical Chinese tunnel shelter. The airflow was increased from a natural flow of 290 cubic feet per minute to 3,680 cubic feet per minute. The 5 excellent Chinese fans each had a blade made of a piece of 3 millimeter, which means approximately 1/8 inch, plywood nailed to a single board. Here is the diagram of what he's talking about. It shows 2 dudes holding like a big old sheet tied to 2 sticks or something. It says number 1, that's the starting position. Number 2, the power stroke. So they brought it up and they swung it, and then they ended the power stroke. And then they brought it back. See, They just change the hand positions while moving fan horizontally back to starting position. So this is if you have a homie, you just go on one end and swing that thing over, and then just switch your hands to the end and then start over. Number 2, with a bed sheet fan. That's probably what this is the bed sheet fan. Use a 2-man bed sheet fan to force thousands of cubic feet per minute of outdoor air through a tunnel or long corridor having at least a 9-foot ceiling and a large opening at each end. The most practical design tested was made from a strong double bed sheet cut down to 6 foot width with the wide hem at its head and left unchanged, and with a similar sized hem sewn in its opposite end to give a finished length of 6 feet. A 6 foot long nominal 1 by 2 inch board or an approximately 1.5 inch diameter stick was secured inside each end hem of various models with waterproof construction adhesive or with tacks or by tying. Before a board was inserted, its edges were rounded. Round sticks were smoothed. 2 persons preparing to use a bed sheet fan, like the sketch we just looked at, should stand facing each other at right angles to the desired direction of airflow, with the cloth extended horizontally between them. Each fanner should grip his stick with one hand near its downwind end and with his other hand near its center. A pair of directional fanners get ready to make a power stroke by leaning in the upwind direction, as illustrated. Then the pair of fanners should count 1, 2, 3, while they 1. Make the power stroke by rapidly sweeping their sticks and the attached cloth in an arc until they are leaning in the downwind direction and the sticks and cloth are again horizontal, like we saw in the sketch. 2 and 3. Hold the sticks and cloth horizontal to permit air that was sucked behind the cloth to continue flowing in the desired direction, while leisurely moving the bed sheet fan back to the starting position. During this move, the fanners change hands as illustrated. Note that what was the upper side of the fan at the beginning of the power stroke now has become the lower side. 2 men thus fanning vigorously produced a net airflow of 5,500 cubic feet per minute through an empty school corridor that is 8 feet wide, has a 9-foot ceiling, and is 194 feet long. The doors at both ends were open to adequately ventilate and cool people crowded into a long tunnel in hot weather. A pair of bed sheet fanners should be positioned about every 100 feet along its length. The practicality of using bed sheet fans to ventilate some very large mines or caves having two or more large openings was proved by tests with members of the Citizens Preparedness Group of Greater Kansas City. These tests were conducted in 1982 near Kansas City in a huge limestone mine that has a ceiling averaging about 17 feet high, corridors about 35 feet wide, columns of unexcavated rock about 15 feet square, and over 1 million square feet of level dry floor space. The air inside is dead, remarkably still, because the only openings are two truck-size portals on one side of the mine. 5 pairs of bed sheet fanners spaced about 75 feet apart down a corridor, after fanning for several minutes, produced a measured airflow of approximately 100,000 cubic feet per minute through this part of this corridor. With many more pairs of bed sheet fanners working, enough air for at least 10,000 occupants could be sucked into this mine through one of its 17 by 20 foot portals, fanned down a corridor to the far dead end of the mine, then fanned through a cross corridor, and finally fanned back out through the corridor that has the second truck-sized portal at its outer end. A pair of pre-mechanization coal miners produced a directed airflow by holding a piece of canvas vertically between them while they quickly walked a short ways in the direction of the desired airflow. They walked back with the canvas held horizontally between them. Then they repeated. C. Additional advantages of directional fans. Number 1, no installation is needed, thus saving working time and materials for making habitable shelters hurriedly built or upgraded during a crisis. Number 2, directional fans enable shelter occupants to quickly reverse the direction of airflow through their shelter when outdoor wind changes cause the direction of natural airflow to be reversed. Number 3, 4 or more directional fans, when used to circulate air within a shelter room, can serve like air ducts while simultaneously fanning occupants. And number 4, directional fans are very unlikely to be damaged by blast effects severe enough to wreck bladed fans or other fixed ventilation devices placed at or near air intake or air exhaust openings but not severe enough to injure shelter occupants. Page 67, Chapter 7, Protection Against Fires and Carbon Monoxide. Relative dangers. Fire and its consequences probably would be the third ranking danger to unprepared Americans subjected to a massive nuclear attack. Direct blast effects would be first, covering a large fraction of densely populated areas and killing far more people. Considerably fewer fatalities seem likely to result from the second ranking danger, fallout radiation. The facts about fire hazards. Firestorms would endanger relatively few Americans. Only the older parts of a few American cities have buildings close enough together over a large enough area to fuel this type of conflagration. Such fires have not occurred in cities where less than about 30% of a large area was covered with buildings. In the blast area of Hiroshima, a terrifying fire storm that burned almost all buildings within an area of about 4.4 square miles resulted from many fires being ignited almost simultaneously. Many were caused by heat radiation from the fireball. Even more fires were due to secondary effects of the blast, such as the overturning of stoves. The buildings contained much wood and other combustible materials. The whole area burned like a tremendous bonfire. Strong winds that blew in from all directions replaced the huge volumes of hot air that rose skyward from the intense fires. Lack of oxygen is not a hazard to occupants of shelters in or near burning buildings, or to those in shelters that are closed tightly to prevent the entry of smoke or fallout. Carbon monoxide, toxic smoke from fires, or high concentrations of carbon dioxide from shelter occupants' exhaled breaths would kill occupants before they suffered seriously from lack of oxygen. Fires ignited by heat radiation. Figure 7.1 shows a wood frame house after it was heated for 1 second by heat radiation from a small nuclear weapon exploded in a Nevada test. This test house had no furnishings, but the heat was intense enough to have ignited exposed upholstery, curtains, bedding, papers, etc. in a typical home. Heat radiation will set fire to easily ignitable materials, such as dry newspapers, thin, dark fabrics, dry leaves, and dry grass, in about the same extensive areas over which blast causes moderate damage to frame houses. The blast wave and high-speed blast winds will blow out many flames. However, tests have shown that fire will continue to smolder within some materials, such as upholstery and dry rotted wood. And after a while, it often will burst into flame and will spread. Then the burning automobile pictured in figure 7.2 is an example of such ignition beyond the range of severe blast damage. The number of fires started by heat radiation in areas where blast is not severe can be reduced by whitewashing the insides of window panes and by removing flammable materials from places in and around houses where heat radiation could reach them. Also, occupants of shelters in some homes that would be only slightly damaged by blast could move quickly to extinguish small fires and throw out smoldering upholstered articles before fallout is deposited. Page 68. Figure 7.1. Heat radiation charred the paint on this house, which had been painted white to reflect heat rays. The charring instantaneously produced the smoke. However, precautions had been taken to prevent this typical U.S. house from being destroyed by fire. Because the test was made to enable engineers to study the effects of blast rather than fire, the house was demolished by the 5 psi overpressure blast that struck seconds later, but it did not burn. Once again, it's in black and white, so it's really hard to tell. All I can see is a house and two-story home in black and white. Figure 7.2. Thermal radiation from a nuclear explosion entered the car about through its closed windows and ignited the upholstery. The windows were blown out by the blast a few seconds later. However, the explosion was at such a distance that the blast wave was not severe enough to dent the car body. It's in black and white. It shows a car. It looks like it's on fire on the bottom, but that's about all you can really see. Page 69. Earth-covered shelters can be protected against heat radiation from nuclear explosions and other causes by painting any exposed wood and other combustible materials at shelter openings with a thick coating of slacked lime, which means old-fashioned whitewash. The World War II firebombing of Kassel was less effective Then were similar raids on other German cities because the roof timbers of buildings had been so treated. Figure 7.3 illustrates the effectiveness of a thick coating of slacked lime in protecting a rough pine board against ignition by heat radiation. No flames from the burning logs touched the board. Before this photograph was taken, the uppermost burning logs of a vertical sided pile were removed so that the board could be seen clearly. Chinese civil defense instructions recommend coating exposed wood with both slacked lime and mud. If only mud is available, a coating of it protects wood quite well. If kept damp, a mud coating is even more effective. Simply keeping all exposed flammable materials damp is helpful. In blast areas, cloth or plastic canopies over the openings of expedient shelters usually would be ignited by the heat and certainly would be blown away by even moderate blast winds. If extra canopies and stakes could be made and kept inside the shelter, these replacements could be quickly erected after blast winds subside and before fallout begins, at least 15 minutes after the explosion. If no spare canopies were available, it would be best to keep the available canopies and their stakes inside the shelter, and if it were not raining. Forest and brush fires. Unless forests or brushy areas are dry, it is difficult to start even scattered fires. Dangerous mass fires would be unlikely, except in blast areas where the heat radiation would be very intense. However, people building a shelter would do well to select a shelter site at least as far away from trees as the height of the tallest tree that could fall on the shelter. Because of fire and smoke hazards in dry weather, and because digging a shelter among tree roots is difficult. Here is figure 7.3. Heat radiation had ignited the flaming half of the board on the ground, while the half near the shovel, painted white with a thick coating of slacked lime, had not even begun to smoke. It's kind of hard to see because it's in black and white, but that's the diagram. And I'm ending it right there.